let's start with this. Just blanket statement. What was your biggest takeaway from the weekend? Because they had 2 games against 2 good teams. Well, maybe 1.5 good teams.
It's kind of a weird weekend to take away from. I think you go into that weekend and you're like, you're probably going to lose one of these games. And you just got to make sure you don't lose both of them. And they give you 40 minutes that are really impressive against Edmonton. Like, just wipe the floor with them. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of the weekend was, but I don't know how they can schedule a back-to-back on the road in Carolina the next night at 6:00. Like, that's brutal. You're playing one of the best teams in the league. I mean, they probably didn't get to sleep until 3:30 in the morning the night before that game. So that's one of those ones where, when you say schedule loss, it feels like a cop-out. But, like, how is that not a schedule loss? Like, I think they're just trying to grind out, maybe get a point on the road in that game, if you can. So all that is to say, I think you have to feel okay about coming out of the weekend. I was actually looking back at the week since we last talked, and disappointing loss to Philly. You crush a not very good Washington team, play really well against Edmonton. I don't know. It kind of feels like a bit of a mixed bag. I'd probably give them like a C+, B- for the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had a few things. One is teams would love to steal that for back-to-backs. The move that they had, the 3 goaltender move, where you send the guy early and say, all right, we do have a crappy back-to-back, and it is going to be difficult, but you go early, you have your beauty rest, because Joe Wool looked amazing. And I went, oh, okay. Maybe we should study this. Maybe you just have the emergency backup in net, right? And you go, oh, yeah, no, he couldn't make it to the rink. He's sick. But in actuality, the goaltender that's getting the next start is already waiting in the city. So I do think that you're going to see teams carry 3 goalies. Like, it's, there were 4 or 5 that did to start this year. I think it's going to start to happen more regularly. You just get a number 3 like Martin Jones, who makes league minimum. And if you can fit that under the cap, then you just carry the 3 guys. Yeah, that's been the problem in the past, right? Is the cap has been flat year over year. So the idea of using any salary cap, even $1 on a third goaltender, is nuts, because everybody feels like, yeah, the move is that, I've said it for a decade. I've been on this take. I think I was on this take first, that goalies would become running backs, and that's kind of where we're at. Is anybody with a rich goaltending contract, you go, are you kidding me? You wouldn't take one in the first round unless it's a special talent, and even then you're like, holy crap. You want to have 2. You want to have 2 different guys, and you don't want to spend any money on them because you're terrified that once they turn a certain age that they're going to turn into pumpkins. And even then, it's like you don't know if you can rely on it consistently. But, yeah, I think, okay, let's start with the goalies then, because this is actually my thing. The way Wool played, Samsonov and Wool, I actually thought both played really well. Samsonov gives up some goals at the end of that game against Edmonton, and he leaves with an injury. So maybe that kind of makes their decision easy. But Wool was unbelievable last night. He was incredible. To me, it's a no-brainer that you start him Tuesday. Where are you at with it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it sounds like Samsonov's not 100% anyway, so I don't think that there's going to be a long deliberation on that one. So the question is, if Wool plays really well on Tuesday against New Jersey, kind of how does the rest of the week play out? I mean, they don't have a really tough schedule coming up in terms of the teams they're facing, so that's not really part of the equation. I think there's a Florida game next week.
Next week is Florida-Tampa, so no, they got those games. That's going to be an important week.
Right, but this week, I mean, you can kind of, you're not worried about facing a juggernaut, and I guess you probably go Wool for 2 of the games and Samsonov for 1 of them, assuming he's okay. And Sheldon Keefe basically said, the 12 games left, they're going to split it in half, and I think very much so. The game 1 playoff starter is up in the air, and these 12 games are going to weigh heavily into what happens there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it doesn't matter how well you play. If the other guy outplays you in the next game, he gets the net. Like, that's the way you got to do it. I actually saw a little bit of the panel yesterday, and they talked about, giving them the splits. I disagree. Like, I'm not into trying to split the net before the playoffs. I'm trying to give one goalie, whoever emerges and just continues to dominate the net, if they continue to do it. And the way that I saw Wool's game was dominance. You're rolling him Tuesday, and then if he continues to look that way, I think that you're rolling him again Thursday. That's the way that I would like to see it. I'm not sure that's the way that they'll do it. But, yeah, especially if Samsonov is a little banged up, good spot for Wool to try to turn this and roll some momentum into a couple of games. Because, yeah, he did come back from the injury. I don't think that he looked 110% like himself, which is natural after missing that much time. But, yeah, that was a really, really, really encouraging sign. Okay, next thing that I took away from the weekend. Is it time to put to bed the Hyman signing in terms of there's 4 years left, but the first 3 have been so good. The cap is going up. Is it over? Like, is this one of the great signings? Does it even matter what basically happens on the back end because of what you got on the front end? How do you view the Hyman signing now that he hits 50 goals and, he gets one against Toronto?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Leafs lost that one the moment it happened, basically. Like, and the thing, too, is he was going to come for less. Yeah. Like the cap hit was going to be lower. I mean, it was going to be more years, but really, the only concern I ever had with Hyman was just injury concern. Remember he had the knee problems and struggled in that playoff. And I wonder if that was some of the doubt that went into it. But it was so close to getting done. And I still never got a great answer for why it didn't get done. And, I remember getting the text and saying, he's going to Edmonton. It's like, wow, like where did this go wrong? Like he should have been a guy that played his whole career in Toronto. He really should have been. And I think that that's what he wanted to do. And, I think that he probably looked at it and he saw the guys, the core 4 guys just getting this huge money. And then they're fighting over hundreds of thousands of dollars and no movement clauses and stuff like that. And Edmonton really, even without the 8th year, they put more money on the table. It's like, this team really, really wants me. So it's a tough one. It's a hometown guy who, and I mean, I don't think the Leafs could ever expect it to be a 50-goal guy, but his trajectory in Toronto was always getting better every year. And honestly, like, I've been around the Leafs for 15 years. I don't think I've met a better person than Zach Hyman. Like, it's just like, you don't get higher quality than that. So
yeah. No, that's the book on him. Like, from everyone is unbelievable guy, unbelievable guy, unbelievable guy, unbelievable person. You look at it now with the cap hit of $5.5 million and you go, that is an unbelievable bargain for someone of his ilk. You look at what Toronto essentially replaced that cap number with, and granted, a lot of it had to do with the extra year, right? The length of the contract. People looked at the injuries and they said, oof. They looked at how much money the team already had tied up at forward. They said, oof, is this going to be a good investment for the team? So I kind of understand it. I think a lot of people looked at it that way. I do think there's a bit of revisionist history from people that there's some people that are going, well, no one said this. No one said this. I actually looked back at all my old tweets about Hyman, and every single one of them I had, this guy is a part of the core now. Like, he's a core player. I look back at some of the shows I did on Hyman, and I was advocating that you needed to re-sign him because that season, as his contract was coming up, he looked awesome, and it just felt as though they really needed him with the team. I will admit that when the contract first happened, I went, ooh, that's a long contract for Zach Hyman. I remember going over the history of players of what I thought his ilk were and how those free agency signings went. But yeah, he totally changed things. And that was going to be my follow-up question to you is, looking back on it, did you ever get an answer on what exactly happened? Because, it did feel like a deal that fell apart on the goal line. And that will be the thing that someday, looking back, is going to be painful to Leaf fans. I think it's going to enter the lore of, do you know the Leafs could have had Wayne Gretzky? Or did you know that the Leafs are about to trade for Vincent Lecavalier? Stuff like that or the Leafs almost could have had Chris Pronger if they would have thrown Alex Steen in a deal and then they end up trading him for Lee Stempniak anyway. It goes into that mix of whoopsies for this organized. Oh, Bobby Orr, he was in their backyard forever and they were like, go look at him. And it's like, who cares? Who is he? It's like, it's not that one. That's the worst one ever. But this goes into that class.
Yeah, no, it did come right down to the end because I remember I was talking to the camp. Is this getting done and how far apart is it? And then all of a sudden, like I said, I got the message and it's like, he's going to Edmonton. It's like, wow, like how did that happen? And I think that the Leafs brass was so worried about the cap and so worried about having another quote unquote overpay that they were really fighting to get the nickels down. And I don't know what the cap hit was, but it would have been under 5 for 8 years, and like at most 5 at most. Yeah. But, with that extra year, and the rumors are that part of it was like the no trade, no movement language on it, which is like, I just can't imagine like not getting it done over that. Like, I don't know. It's a big time miss for sure.
Man, I'm really only doing this as a joke and I want to move on, but I can't remember a year where a general manager took as big of a beating as Kyle Dubas is taking. Like, Hyman's out there scoring 50 goals. Carlson murdered the team's power play and just killed their cap situation and basically ended the era of Pittsburgh being a competitive hockey team. The group they fielded was awful again. He went and recycled all the same Leafs guys, and it's not working out. He traded for his boy Bunting and got a return that is being mocked by every single person I've talked to in the Gensel trade. Toronto, he fumbled the bag trying to do the negotiation. He took the PR hit of trying to do the, I would never take another job, and then takes another job, and it's the one that he was rumored to be taking all along. And Tree Living has made a bunch of moves that have made this team competent and not look any different than any of the Dubas teams. It's just, it's not a good cycle. Anyways, all right. My last thing from takeaways from the weekends that not Leaf related. Is Edmonton good?
Honestly, I think they kind of are what their record is, and everyone keeps talking about them like, oh, they're the favorite or they're one of the favorites. It's like they're in ninth place. And, I know that part of that's the slow start, and they've been red hot since then, but I think they're like a ninth place team. I think they could win the cup, but they've got holes. Yeah. I was listening to you guys, I think the other day, and you were saying they're kind of like the Leafs a little bit where, they've got, it's not they're playing Cody Ceci like regular minutes. We've seen that show. We know what that looks like. And they have a lot of guys on the back end who aren't great defensively and world-class forwards, but it's a hard way to win in the playoffs. When the power play is such a big part of putting up the regular season record that you do, and you get into the playoffs, and you're going to be playing games where there's going to be, two power play split between the two teams, you got to be really airtight 5-on-5, and that's Edmonton's issue. And I don't know, getting Ekholm last year was huge. They've been better defensively since adding him. I like the coaching change. I think Chris Knobloch's a fantastic coach, but are they going to get goaltending? Are they going to be able to lock games down when they've got guys like Nurse and Ceci out there, Bouchard? And it's such a big year for them too. That Draisaitl contract's winding down, and then McDavid's not that far behind it. Ken Holland's deal's up. There's going to be a new regime change there. They got to be careful. Do they keep the window open here, and do they keep those guys happy? And and the other thing too is that Edmonton could get Vegas in the first round. You look at how the West is shaping up, and it looks like it's going to be a really tough road for them. And I think to answer your question, I think that they're a top 10 team, but I don't think they're a top 5 team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it too, is that they're very similar Leafs. The difference is I don't believe in the Skinner thing. I don't think that you're going to see him be great through a bunch of rounds in the Stanley Cup playoffs and be able to steal you a series or steal you a bunch of games. And no one saw Aiden Hill coming, right? And there have been other goaltending stories that have happened in the NHL that people thought, oh, okay, this guy's not good enough, and then he turned out to be. But I don't feel like they're going to be able to get enough saves, and I don't think they're going to ever be able to do a good enough job protecting him. They're going to have to outscore their opponents in a meaningful pace throughout the playoffs for me to think that they're contenders still. It's tough, and all that savings that they make on Hyman, it feels completely offset by the Nurse contract. And I brought this up on Leafs Talk the other night.
Well, the Jack Campbell contract too, right? They've got the Connor Brown contract. It's a bit of a mess there.
I thought Connor Brown only made 1 point something though.
Yeah, no? But he had a bonus in his deal, which is almost $3 million, which is, all the overage is going to go into next year's cap. Their cap sheet next year is a total mess. So if they had just a little bit cleaner cap situation, then they would be in a different situation. If they could take that Campbell money and put that on another goalie or another defenseman or upgrade on Ceci, they'd be I think their forward group looks pretty good. You bring Henrique in there and it looks pretty solid, but I don't know if it's going to be enough.
I had no idea the contract was structured that way. I'm just looking it up now. It's a nightmare. It's a minimum hit this year, but then next year rolls over into performance bonuses that they're 3.25. What are the performance bonuses? I don't see them. It's my God!
If
it's just
you play 10 games or something. No, the contract's a total nightmare. And the most bizarre thing is Connor Brown's agent is now the president of the Oilers.
Yeah,
and that deal got done. It's and doesn't he still just have the one goal?
Yeah, no, I think he has 2. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think he's a -8, 2 goals and 50 something. Yeah, it's not It's not what you want. And I'm actually a big Connor Brown fan. Like he's,
he's the best. But
when they
injuries
first did that
and,
signing, I thought, "Ooh, what a steal!" And I didn't, but I had no idea that there was that rollover of hitting you on the cap sheet next year. But you are a cap guy, and you are someone who knows what everybody makes essentially in the league. Is there a worse contract than the Darnell Nurse one?
Well, I mean, I think that Connor Brown one's up there.
No, but that's only
Jack
1
Campbell.
year, right? That's only 1 year. Yeah, Jack Campbell one. He doesn't even play in the NHL, so that's probably a pretty fair one. Yeah,
there's
so
guys
they
that
own
can't
3 of the worst contracts
like
in
Nurse,
the NHL.
Nurse can play top 4 minutes, right? Like he's overpaid, but I mean, what's Nurse actually worth? 6.5? So he's overpaid by a couple million or whatever. But there's worse contracts than that for sure. I mean, you're testing me off the top of my head, but
yeah. You can take your time. You get back on this. This is a project for you, okay? Sorry, I should have texted this to you earlier. This is my bad. I'm owning the responsibility. Bad host stuff. But I do want this answer from you, what you think are the worst contracts, because, all I could think of watching that game Saturday was it's got to be Nurse. It's got to be Nurse because there's not really... Yeah, like I'm not really sure what the special thing he's supposed to bring is. Like what even like when you say $6 million, I'm going, I guess maybe with the cap going up, I haven't really figured out what guys are gonna be worth. But I don't feel comfortable with him protecting a lead, and I don't want him out there for trying to get a goal. So, what is it you say you do here? So yeah, I don't even know if I would want him at that number that you put out there. Anyways, okay, next takeaway from the weekend for me. Everybody wondered about the blue line moves and did the Leafs do enough on the blue line, but Edmondson looks good, and I think the numbers are pretty good. And all of a sudden, Liljegren is playing pretty great, especially by Liljegren standards. I don't know if he's going to stay on the power play, but yeah, what do you make of what we're seeing from the blue line since the deadline?
Yeah, I mean, Edmondson against, I was going to say Vancouver. Edmondson against the Oilers was unbelievable. Mm-hmm. Like he played almost half the game.
Yep.
And was just nasty and fantastic. And, I think you look at it and it's like, why was Washington not barely playing this guy? Like what's going on with the Capitals? Not a very good team. And they're playing him like 15, 16 minutes a night. Like that's kind of the weird thing. And really, you talk to people in Montreal, the biggest concern with Edmondson and the reason they traded him is just the injury concern. So if he's healthy and he can make it through a playoff grind of, 20, 22 games on a run, as he's done multiple times, then you're good. And he's not that old. He's just had the back problems, which you got to worry about. I mean, he was never a great skater. He's not fast and he's gotten slower, but the things he does bring are, you can just see watching that Oilers game, the other team's going to hate him in a playoff series. And the Leafs don't have a lot of guys like that. Mm-hmm. I think you guys were talking about on the show, like, well, who's the last defenseman the Leafs have had like this? Like just the nasty, and I was drawing a blank. I can't even think of who it would be.
Yeah. He's been awesome to me. And even though, like, I know you're saying he's not the fleetest of foot, but I actually think that he moves okay for a guy his size. Like, I expected watching him regularly that he was going to look extremely stiff, and I was going to go, oh, my God, him getting out caught in space. But he can recover, and he knows how to move the size. He's been great. I will say, I just Googled, your site has NHL trade grades. Joel Edmondson is a potentially huge downgrade for Maple Leafs. That's a tough headline. That's not what that writer wanted to happen for the Joel Edmondson start so far. But yeah, I think that he does bring a different dynamic to their blue line, which is something that they've been searching for at a pretty limited cost. And yeah, I think that's kind of it, is if he's healthy and he's giving you this, you're pretty happy with it. The bigger one to me is, and I keep saying that playoffs will determine all of this, but Liljegren is looking much better at the right time. That's huge for them, for a team that also we've belabored over and over, doesn't have many guys who can break it out.
Yeah, I think that you need him. Yeah. That was part of the concern, I think, too, with bringing in Edmondson and Lyubushkin is like, okay, does this mean that Liljegren's out? But I think you need Liljegren in the playoff lineup, for good and bad. Mm-hmm. I mean, after the Edmonton game, I tweeted Liljegren has 14 points in his last 16 games. Like, he's really dialed up, and that's not just all being on PP1. Like, there's been a lot of plays lately at even strength where Liljegren's created something and made something happen. And if Edmondson and Liljegren is your third pair, they're going to be fantastic. If they're your second pair, you can live with it. But the way the pairs are right now, I'm not really sure who's 1, 2, 3.
That was always it.
If you have Riley Labushkin and then McCabe Brody and then Edmondson Lilgren, I don't know which one's your shutdown pair. I don't know which one's your top pair. I don't know which one's your sheltered third pair. It's kind of like they all have pros and cons, basically. And it'll be interesting to see how, if Keefe sticks with those pairings, how he uses that group.
So I weirdly think that what you're going to see is the pairings look that way. And then if it gets into the final couple minutes of protecting a lead, they're going to shuffle up the pairings and try to create their own shutdown lines. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For even strength most of the game, they'll have it look this way. But I bet you they want to have Edmondson on the ice to be protecting leads late. They're going to treat him like a shutdown defenseman come playoff time, but there ain't no way in hell that Liljegren's going to be the guy on his right side. I bet you it's going to end up being Brody.
Well, and conversely, if they need a goal late, Edmondson's not going to be out there, right? So then you shuffle it up. And, there's been some games lately where you get a Riley Lilgren pairing out there late in the game, and it's 6-on-5, and it's like, this actually looks pretty good. Like, it looks, so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That's probably what's going to happen is that, you sit Lilgren, and all of a sudden you're playing. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with Brody. I mean, he's the huge wild card. Keefe seems to think that they can rehabilitate him and, sit him a little bit and get him back. But I don't know. I mean, I think at this point, you're probably going to have to shelter him going into the playoffs. And then that means you're going to need Edmondson and Lilgren to really play some tough minutes.
Okay, last observation for the weekend from me. Marner's missed 7 games. Apparently he's progressing. Apparently he's skating. But how do you use him when he gets back? What do you do with the lines now when he gets back?
I mean, I can't imagine he's not going to be back with Matthews again. I mean, I just, that feels like for sure. But I don't know.
I guess who's the other guy on their line then?
Yeah, I know. So do you think you go Domi? I've been thinking about this. Like, both Domi and Marner are pass first guys. So you just have. Does that matter? Does it matter when your center is Matthews and you want him taking all the shots? Is there too much sameness there with Domi and Marner? That would be the one. That's one question. And then the other question is, you want to continue to use Matthews and Marner in defensive zone situations and shutdown situations. Can you do that with Domi on the left wing?
No, you can't. But here's the thing. Domi gets all this crap for being a bad defensive forward, and I'm sure that the underlying numbers are worse for him than they are for Nyes because of who he got to play with for the entire season. But I don't think I've ever seen Nyes get the puck out of his own end. Like, I'm not sure he's capable of it.
Well, he's not good either.
That's what I'm saying.
Not good. I mean, you're comparing two guys who aren't good defensively.
But that's what I mean is they've played Nyes on the left wing all year long, and I'm not trying to criticize him. I think he's going to end up being, a good player, and we always had too much expectation for Matthew Nyes going in this year, right? Like, that was always going to be an actual Toronto thing. That is one thing we all do poorly with the market, from the media to the fan base, whatever, is we see the young guys and we get so excited and we project the best case scenario for them. But ultimately, like, Matthew Nyes probably could have used some seasoning with the Marlies and taken his time. And
and he was a second round pick too. It's not like it's not like a top 10 guy, that can step right in. So his development curve has been super promising, but he's still got a ways to go.
That's all I'm saying is I believe in Nyes. I think he's an important part of the future. I'm glad that they've never traded him But yeah, when it comes to a defensive forward, I don't think that's very strong. When it comes to D-zone exits, I don't see a guy who is very strong at winning puck battles in his own end and getting the puck out, which is the main issue I have with Max Domi. I've seen Nyes take a lot of bad penalties in his own end. It's not a great role for him. I would try the Domi thing and then do kind of what we talked about with the blue line, which is you're protecting a lead. Yarncrocs up there, right? He's getting more minutes. You get an offensive zone faceoff, you try it. The difference, the thing about the pass first and the, the abundance of the same thing is Domi can actually rip the puck. Like, Marner doesn't have an incredible shot. He's got that one really good move that he's been able to score with all season long. But Domi can actually rip it. And so I think the messaging for him would be, hey, we want you to make plays. We want you to move the puck, but every once in a while you gotta rip it a bit more. And if you start scoring some goals on this line, you can stay. And then you have a second line where it's Bertuzzi, Tavares, Nylander, and you kind of go from there. Because, that's it to me. That's kind of the way you run it. And then Yarncroc and Domi sort of flip at times depending on what the situation is in the playoffs.
Yeah. So if you do that, then Kampf or Dewar is your
Kampf.
third line center. Yeah.
It's a problem. Yeah. You were right. They should have tried to get one other center at the deadline. Again, they had the issue without having the second round pick, which made it difficult because the guys went for that. I don't know if I would have wanted Henrique, especially for a first round pick, and I know they got more, but
no, I wouldn't have traded first round pick, but I think that there was probably a way to get a better upgrade at center. I mean, it sounds, there was so much talk about defense, but I think if you just brought in Edmondson and someone who could play third line center, I think that would make a lot of sense for what they needed. So, because it's potentially going to be a problem where they're just not able to generate any offense from their bottom six.
Yeah. You know what, though? It's so funny because I feel like there are more guys than ever that could score them a big goal in the playoffs, right? Let's go through the list. And I've already done this, but it's Domi, it's Yarncroc, right? It's Bertuzzi, and I'm talking outside the core four, obviously. I actually still believe Nyes could score them a big goal. Think that could absolutely happen. I would definitely put Bobby McMahon now in that mix. And yet now it feels like you have this abundance of wingers where you're going, well, who's getting what time? Like, even if you have a McMahon, Kampf, Yarncroc third line, right? Is that going to be, are those guys going to generate offense? Like, how are they going to figure that out? And if they would have just had another center that could play some passable offensive hockey, it would have given you a lot more versatility with what you could have done, because I think, to me, the actual ideal thing is to have Tavares with Yarncroc and Bobby McMahon, and then another line that was to have potentially Bertuzzi and Nylander on it, but a pivot who can do some things offensively without killing you defensively, like Domi was when he was down the middle.
Well, God forbid, but imagine like a center goes down with an injury. Like, I don't know what they're going to do. So they're thin there. And they've been thin there a while. Like, for whatever reason, they've always had lots of wingers that can't play down the middle.
Yeah, you would, and I don't know why they didn't get a little bit more aggressive with trying some of those guys for a little longer. You know, like if you were going to try Domi down the middle, and they started at the very beginning of the year, was Nylander's going to earn his money down the middle, and then they did it for one preseason game. Or it's like, why can't you try Yarncroc at center? Like, he seems like he would have a decent skill set for trying that at least, and I don't think they ever have.
No, he played there a bit in Nashville, certainly when he was younger. He's not great on faceoffs. I know his numbers aren't great, but he's certainly good enough defensively that, I don't know, it makes some sense to me.
Yeah. Anyway, all right, those are my weekend thoughts. Anything else? Did I miss anything?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's all of a sudden it feels like the last 12 games are kind of interesting, right? With there's like uncertainty about everything, and I wonder if they go back to Domi at center at some point, or if they've completely moved. I like him better on the wing, and I think that you play him with talent and you can really see what he can do. But then again, if you put, concern would be if you have Nyes, McMahon, Yarncroc, or whoever playing with Kampf on the third line, you're nullifying their value as well. And it'll be harder for them to come up with that big goal that you're talking about.
Yeah. I said it on last week's show, but in hindsight, like, everyone talks about the Klingberg deal, and yes, they got away with one because that was obviously their worst move of the offseason. But in a weird way, when they lost Ryan O'Reilly and they offered him more and he left, and then they kind of panicked because the center market wasn't deep, and they gave Kampf that deal. It's not that he makes way too much. It's that he's just not a good fit with this team, because you can get a Dewar to be your fourth line defensive center, right? And the drop off is not significantly different between Dewar and Kampf. Like, do you think there's any difference in those two players? Like, really? Like, not materially. I'm sure maybe
experience, size,
he's bigger.
And to correct you, Kampf does make too much money, like 2.4 on a long-term deal. Like, I don't even know if they're going to be able to trade that contract if they want to.
I feel like for a guy who's durable and can play that many games, and I just thought about stuff like what Deneau got that 1 year, and I know Deneau's better, but I didn't feel like Kampf was some ridiculous overpay. You can say he makes too much money. I agree with you, but I don't think that it was one where I'm like, oh my God, how are they ever? But the bigger thing is that he just kind of clogs up a spot, and you don't really have anywhere to play him, because you weren't going to put him on a fourth line with some of the guys they have, and he made too much money to be there. And then to have him on the third line, he's not competent enough offensively to play with any talent. And so you kind of lose something there. But
Kampf only has value when you use him on like when he was playing with Mikheyev and Engvall, and they were three guys who could skate, who were big, and it was just really
that looked good.
To eat the defensive zone draws and play against other teams' good players and not give up anything, and they did that pretty well. But if you don't have a line built like that around Kampf, then all of a sudden, you're looking at it and it's like he's not giving you much more than Dewar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's bang on. James, thanks as always for the time, brother. We'll talk to you next week.
Okay, thanks, JD.
See you, pal.